Hello everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel, The English Globe. I hope you all are doing well. Today we have an important topic: how to understand fast English speakers. Many learners struggle with this because native speakers talk quickly and connect words. It can be hard to follow conversations, movies, or TV shows. But don't worry, you're not alone. In this episode, we'll share simple tips to help you understand fast English better.
That's right. Many students learn English in a classroom where speech is slow and clear. But in real life, native speakers talk much faster. They don't pronounce every word separately. They use contractions and connect words. For example, instead of saying, "What do you want to do?" a native speaker might say, "What do you want to do?" This makes English sound completely different.
Exactly. A lot of learners think their English is not good enough. But the real problem is that they haven't trained their ears for natural speech. Understanding fast English is a skill. With the right practice, anyone can improve. That's why today's episode is important. We'll share simple techniques that will help you follow conversations more easily. By the end of this podcast, you'll feel much more confident.
Yes. We'll also give you practical exercises to improve your listening skills. If you struggle with understanding native speakers, don't worry. This is completely normal. With regular practice, you will get better. So, stay with us until the end of the episode. You'll learn valuable techniques to improve your listening step by step. Ready to start? Let's go.
Now that we've introduced today's topic, let's talk about why fast English is so difficult to understand. Many learners struggle not because they don't know enough English, but because spoken English is very different from the English they study in books. When you're learning from a textbook or in a classroom, you hear slow, clear speech where each word is pronounced separately. But in real conversations, native speakers don't talk that way. They speak quickly, blend words together, and often change the way words sound. This can make it really hard to follow what they're saying, especially if you're not used to it.
Exactly. One of the biggest challenges is that native speakers naturally speak at a fast pace. They don't pause between words the way learners expect them to. Instead, their speech flows smoothly, and they often reduce or shorten words without even realizing it. For example, when a native speaker says, "Did you eat?" it might sound like, "Did ya eat?" The words blend together so much that it can be difficult to recognize them. This is called connected speech, and it's one of the main reasons why fast English feels so hard to understand.
That's a great point, Julia. Connected speech happens in almost every sentence, and it's something that textbooks don't always teach. Let's take another example. The phrase, "I am going to meet my friend." In written English, every word is clear. But in spoken English, people don't say "going to." Instead, they say "gonna." So the sentence sounds like, "I'm gonna meet my friend." If you're not familiar with these changes, it might feel like you're hearing a completely different sentence. And that's just one example. Native speakers do this all the time, which is why beginners often struggle to keep up.
Right, and not only do native speakers shorten words, but they also blend sounds together in a way that makes individual words harder to hear. A common example is, "I don't know," which is often said as "I don't know." If you expect to hear each word separately, you might get confused. Another example is, "What are you doing?" which often sounds like "what you're doing." These reductions happen naturally in conversation, and they make English sound much faster than it really is.
Yes, and this happens because of something called sound linking. In English, when one word ends in a consonant sound, and the next word starts with a vowel sound, they connect smoothly. For example, instead of saying "turn it off" with a pause between each word, a native speaker might say "turn it off" as if it were one long word. This linking makes English feel faster because there are fewer pauses between words. For learners who aren't used to it, it can feel overwhelming because it's hard to tell where one word ends and the next one begins.
That's so true. And there's another reason why fast English is hard to understand: idioms and slang. Even if you know a lot of vocabulary, Native speakers often use phrases that don't make sense if you translate them word for word. For example, if someone says it's a piece of cake, they don't mean they're talking about food. They mean something is very easy. Or, if they say, "I'm feeling under the weather," they mean they're sick, not literally under the weather. These expressions make English harder to understand because even if you recognize all the words, the meaning might not be clear.
That's such an important point, and slang makes it even more difficult. Different English-speaking countries and even different regions have their own slang words. For example, in American English, people often say gonna instead of going to, but in British English, you might hear gonna or even goin' without the G sound. Some slang words are completely different. An American might say awesome to mean something is great, while a British person might say brilliant. If you don't know these expressions, you might feel lost in a conversation.
Yes, and sometimes native speakers mix idioms, slang, and connected speech all in the same sentence, which makes it even harder for learners to understand. Imagine hearing someone say, "I don't know, but I'm going to head out because I'm feeling kinda under the weather." If you're not used to this way of speaking, it might sound completely confusing. But once you start recognizing patterns and learning how words change in natural speech, it gets much easier to follow.
Absolutely. The key takeaway here is that fast English is not just about speed. It's about the way English is naturally spoken. Native speakers use connected speech, reduce words, blend sounds, and add slang and idioms, all of which can make English feel much faster than it actually is. But once you become familiar with these patterns, your listening skills will improve dramatically.
Yes. So, if you've ever felt frustrated because English sounds too fast, don't worry. It's completely normal. Every learner struggles with this at first, but with practice and the right techniques, you can train your ears to recognize these patterns and understand English much more easily. In the next section, we'll share some practical methods to help you improve your listening skills and get used to fast English. So stay with us. We have lots of great tips coming up.
That's right. Keep listening, and let's move on to the next part. Now that we understand why fast English is so difficult, let's talk about how you can improve your listening skills step by step. The good news is that listening is a skill, and just like any skill, it can be improved with the right practice. Many learners feel frustrated because they try to understand everything at full speed from the beginning, but that's like trying to run before you've learned to walk. The key is to train your ears gradually, starting with slower audio and then moving to more natural, fast speech over time. One of the best ways to do this is to start with slow audio first. If you try to listen to a fast English conversation right away, it might feel overwhelming because your brain isn't used to processing words at that speed. Instead, begin with slower recordings, such as English learning podcasts or audiobooks that are designed for learners. These resources are spoken clearly and at a pace that allows you to hear each word separately. Once you feel comfortable, gradually increase the speed by listening to more natural conversations, such as interviews, news reports, or even TV shows. Over time, your brain will adapt, and you'll find it much easier to understand fast English.
That's such an important tip, Adam. I always tell students to be patient with themselves because listening comprehension doesn't improve overnight. One great method to improve your listening is called the shadowing technique. This is a powerful exercise that helps you train your ears and your speaking skills at the same time. The idea is simple. You listen to a sentence from a podcast, an audiobook, or a video, and then pause and repeat it aloud exactly as you heard it. Try to copy the pronunciation, rhythm, and even the way words are connected. For example, if you hear a native speaker say, "What do you want to do?" don't just repeat it slowly as separate words. Instead, copy the way a native speaker says it naturally. "What do you want to do?" This will help your brain get used to the way words are really spoken in everyday conversations. The more you practice shadowing, the easier it will be to recognize fast speech in real life. You don't have to understand every single word right away. The goal is to train your ears to hear English the way native speakers actually say it.
That's such a great technique, Julia. Shadowing is one of the best ways to develop listening fluency because it forces you to actively engage with what you're hearing. But another important strategy is to focus on key words instead of trying to understand every single word in a sentence. Many learners get stuck because they feel like they need to understand every word perfectly. But in real life, that's not how listening works. Even native speakers don't hear every word clearly, but they understand the meaning based on context. For example, imagine someone says, "Hey, do you want to grab a coffee later?" If you don't understand the word grab, you might feel confused. But if you focus on the key words, coffee and later, you can guess the meaning of the sentence. You don't need to know every single word to follow a conversation. Instead of trying to translate every word in your head, train yourself to listen for the most important words and phrases. This will help you stay engaged in conversations without feeling overwhelmed.
Yes, that's a huge mistake many learners make. They focus too much on the words they don't understand, instead of paying attention to the overall meaning. In real conversations, it's normal to miss a few words, but that doesn't mean you won't understand the message. And this brings us to another important strategy: practicing with different English accents. Many learners focus only on one accent, such as American or British English, but in reality, English is spoken in many different ways around the world. If you only train your ears to recognize one type of pronunciation, you might struggle when you hear someone with a different accent. For example, the word water sounds different in American, British, and Australian English. An American might say water, a Brit might say water, and an Australian might say woda. If you're not used to hearing different accents, it can be confusing. That's why it's important to expose yourself to different types of English by listening to speakers from different countries. You can do this by watching interviews, listening to podcasts, or even using online resources that include various accents. The more you listen, the better your ears will get at recognizing different pronunciations, and you'll feel more confident in real-world conversations.
That's a great point. English is a global language, and you never know which accent you'll need to understand. If you're learning English for work, travel, or studying abroad, you might hear many different accents in daily life. The best way to prepare for this is to practice listening to a variety of speakers. Start with accents that are similar to the ones you're most familiar with, and then gradually challenge yourself with new ones. For example, if you're used to American English, try listening to a British speaker and notice how certain words sound different. The more you expose yourself to different accents, the easier it will be to understand English in any situation.
Exactly. And one final tip that can really help is using subtitles strategically. A lot of learners watch English videos with subtitles in their native language, but this actually stops them from improving because their brain focuses on reading instead of listening. Instead, try watching a video with English subtitles first. This will help you connect spoken words with their written forms. Then, watch the same video without subtitles and see how much you can understand. This method will train your ears to recognize real spoken English while improving your reading and listening skills at the same time.
That's such a great tip. Subtitles can be a useful tool if you use them the right way. And remember, improving your listening takes time and practice, so don't feel discouraged if you don't understand everything right away. The more you listen, the better you will get. Just like learning any other skill, consistency is the key to success. If you practice listening every day, even just for 10 to 15 minutes, you will see huge improvements over time.
That's right. So to quickly review, here are the 4 main strategies we talked about today. Start with slow audio and gradually move to faster, natural speech. Use the shadowing technique to train your ears and improve pronunciation. Focus on key words instead of trying to understand every single word. Practice listening to different accents to improve overall comprehension. If you follow these techniques regularly, your listening skills will improve dramatically. And most importantly, don't be afraid to make mistakes. The more you practice, the more confident you will become.
Absolutely. Keep practicing, keep listening, and don't give up. In the next part of our podcast, we'll talk about some fun and effective listening exercises you can try at home to make learning even easier. So stay with us. We'll be right back. All right. Now that we've talked about strategies for improving your listening skills, let's go one step further. Let's talk about how you can train your ears to understand fast English more easily. A lot of learners feel frustrated because even when they practice, native speakers still sound too fast. The truth is, your ears need time to adjust to natural English speech, just like your muscles need time to get stronger when you exercise. But don't worry, there are specific techniques that will help you train your ears step by step. One of the best ways to do this is by listening to podcasts and audiobooks. Podcasts are a great tool because they help you get used to real, natural English conversations. Unlike traditional English lessons, podcasts feature real-life discussions with normal speed, connected speech, and natural pronunciation. The more you listen to these conversations, the easier it will be to understand native speakers in everyday situations.
That's right. And the best part is that podcasts are easy to include in your daily routine. You can listen to them while commuting, exercising, or even doing household chores. If you're a beginner, start with podcasts designed for English learners. These podcasts usually have clear pronunciation and slightly slower speed, making them easier to follow. Once you feel more comfortable, challenge yourself by listening to native speaker podcasts, such as interviews, storytelling shows, or discussions on interesting topics. Another great tool is audiobooks. Audiobooks are helpful because they allow you to follow along with a text while listening. If you find a book that you enjoy, try listening to the audiobook version while reading the text. This will help you connect spoken words with their written forms, improving both your listening and reading skills at the same time. Over time, your brain will start recognizing words and phrases more quickly, making it easier to understand fast speech.
Exactly. And speaking of following along with text, another great way to train your ears is by watching movies or TV shows with subtitles first. Many learners get frustrated when they watch English movies because the dialogue is too fast. But if you use subtitles strategically, they can actually help you improve your listening comprehension. Here's how you can do it. First, watch a scene with English subtitles. This will help you understand what the characters are saying while seeing the words on the screen. Then, watch the same scene again without subtitles and see how much you can catch. The first time, you'll be reading and listening at the same time. But when you remove the subtitles, your ears will have to do all the work, which trains your brain to recognize words more quickly.
That's such a useful technique. And if you really want to challenge yourself, you can watch the scene a third time. But this time, try to repeat what the characters say. This will help you improve both your listening and speaking skills. Watching movies in English is one of the most enjoyable ways to train your ears because you're exposed to real-life conversations, slang, and natural expressions. Plus, when you enjoy what you're watching, you stay motivated to keep learning. Another effective technique is repeat listening. Many learners think they have to understand everything the first time they hear it, but that's not true. When native speakers talk fast, it's completely normal to miss some words at first. That's why listening multiple times to the same conversation can help you catch new details each time.
Absolutely. Think about when you listen to your favorite song. The first time, you might not understand all the lyrics, but after listening to it a few times, you start recognizing more words and phrases. The same thing happens with spoken English. The first time you listen to a podcast or a conversation, just focus on getting the general idea. Don't worry if you don't understand every word. Then, listen to it again, and this time, try to catch more details. The more times you listen, the more you will understand. And here's a great trick. Write down the words or phrases you don't understand, then look them up later. When you listen again, you'll recognize those words more easily, and over time, They will become part of your natural vocabulary.
That's such a great tip. And another tool that many learners don't realize they can use is the YouTube playback speed feature. A lot of people don't know this, but on YouTube, you can actually slow down videos if they feel too fast. This is super helpful when you're listening to native speaker conversations that seem difficult to follow. Here's how you can use it. First, slow down the video to about 0.75x speed. This will make it a little slower, but the speech will still sound natural. Listen at this speed until you feel comfortable. Then, gradually increase the speed back to normal as you improve. Some advanced learners even speed up videos to train their ears for extra fast speech. But the key is to start slow and work your way up.
That's such a powerful technique. And the best part is that you can use this with almost any YouTube video, whether it's a conversation, an interview, or even an English learning lesson. The goal is to train your ears step by step, so you're not just passively listening but actively improving your ability to follow fast speech. Now let's quickly go over the main techniques we talked about today. Listen to podcasts and audiobooks to get used to natural English speed. Watch movies or TV shows with subtitles first, then remove them. Use repeat, listening to hear the same conversation multiple times and catch more details. Use the YouTube playback speed feature to slow down videos first, then increase the speed as you improve. If you practice these techniques regularly, your ears will gradually get better at understanding fast English. Remember, listening is a skill, and the more you train your ears, the easier it will become.
That's right. So don't feel discouraged if fast speech seems difficult at first. Just keep practicing, and over time, you'll see huge improvements in your listening skills. And in the next part of our podcast, we'll share some fun and interactive exercises that you can do every day to make your listening practice even more effective. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
All right, now that we've gone through some strategies to improve your listening skills, it's time to talk about real-life conversation practice, which is essential for understanding fast English. One of the biggest challenges for English learners is that native speakers don't speak in the slow, clear manner you often hear in language lessons or textbooks. In real-life conversations, native speakers tend to speak much faster, and this can be overwhelming, especially when they use connected speech, contractions, and informal expressions. To help you get used to this, we're going to break down what happens in natural conversations, and we'll explain how to train your ears to understand the fast-paced, casual English you'll hear in everyday life.
Exactly, Adam. It's really important to understand that in real conversations, native speakers don't always pronounce every word clearly or fully. Instead, we tend to connect words, drop syllables, and use informal phrases that can make it difficult to understand, especially if you're not familiar with how English is spoken naturally. This is why it's so important to listen to authentic English, the way it's actually used in daily life. When you listen to real conversations, you get exposed to the fast pace, informal speech, and connected sounds that native speakers use without thinking about it. This exposure is crucial for improving your ability to follow along in everyday situations.
Absolutely. One of the first things you'll notice when listening to native speakers is that they often link words together. For example, instead of saying, "I am going to," clearly and separately, native speakers might say, "I'm gonna." Similarly, want to becomes wanna, and got to becomes gotta. These are contractions that make speech much quicker and more fluid. They're a natural part of fast English, and if you're not used to them, they can make it seem like the speaker is talking too fast. But once you become familiar with these contractions, it'll be easier to understand native speakers.
And this kind of connected speech happens all the time in real conversations. For instance, instead of saying "I don't know" in a slow, clear way, many native speakers say something like, "I don't know." The T sound is dropped, and it's spoken much more casually. You'll also hear this with other phrases like "I want to," which becomes "I wanna," and "should have," which turns into "shoulda." These reductions make the speech sound faster and smoother. and they are things that learners often miss when they first start listening to native speakers. But don't worry, over time, you'll start picking up these patterns and understanding will become much easier.
Exactly. Another thing that can make fast English hard to follow is the use of idioms and slang. These are phrases that don't always have a clear, literal meaning, which makes them difficult for learners to understand. For example, in a conversation, you might hear a native speaker say, "I'm feeling under the weather," which means, "I'm feeling sick." If you're not familiar with this expression, it can sound strange, and you might not understand what the speaker means. Similarly, people use slang in fast speech to express things informally. For example, someone might say, "That's lit," meaning, "That's great," or "That's awesome." If you're not familiar with slang, it can make understanding native speakers even more challenging.
That's a great point, Adam. And these idioms and slang expressions are part of the natural flow of English in daily life. Native speakers use them without thinking about it, but for learners, it can feel like you're hearing a whole new language. The best way to deal with this is to keep listening to real conversations, whether it's in movies, podcasts, TV shows, or just talking with native speakers, and try to pick up these expressions over time. The more you listen, the more these idioms and slang will start to make sense, and eventually you'll find that you can understand fast English much more easily.
Exactly, Julia. So, in summary, the main reason fast English is hard to understand is because native speakers don't speak in the clear, slow way that you might hear in language lessons. Instead, they use connected speech, reductions, and informal expressions that make English sound faster and smoother. It can be challenging at first, but with practice, you'll start to pick up on these patterns and become more comfortable with fast English. Keep listening to real-life conversations, and remember that it's okay if you don't catch everything right away. With time, it will get easier. All right, now that we've discussed a number of effective strategies for improving your listening skills, it's time to shift focus to something that is just as essential in your language learning journey: confidence and patience. These two qualities might not seem as obvious at first, but trust me, they are absolutely critical if you want to get better at understanding fast English. A lot of learners, especially beginners, get discouraged when they find it difficult to understand native speakers. But the truth is, understanding fast English takes time, and more importantly, it takes a positive mindset. If you're confident in your ability to learn and you're patient with yourself during the process, you will find that you make much more progress than you might expect. Fast English can seem overwhelming at first, but over time, you'll find it much easier to follow.
Exactly, Adam. It's really easy to become frustrated, especially when you're faced with a fast-paced conversation where you don't catch every word or phrase. But the key here is not to panic or lose confidence. If you don't understand something immediately, don't be afraid to ask someone to repeat it. It's totally okay to ask a native speaker to slow down or to repeat what they said. In fact, most native speakers will appreciate the fact that you're making an effort to understand them, and they'll be happy to help. The important thing is to keep practicing and keep listening. The more you practice listening to fast English, the better you will get at understanding it. And this doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process, so you must be patient with yourself.
That's such a great point, Julia. The reality is that learning to understand fast English is not something that happens in a matter of days or weeks. It's a journey that requires time and consistent effort. And this is where patience really comes in. When you first start listening to fast English, it's normal to feel overwhelmed, and you might even feel like you're not making progress. But if you keep at it and consistently expose yourself to natural, real-life conversations, you'll slowly begin to notice improvements. Over time, your brain will get used to the rhythm and patterns of natural speech, and you'll find that you can understand more and more. But none of this happens quickly. You've got to stick with it and trust the process.
Absolutely, Adam. And just like you mentioned earlier, one of the most important aspects of building confidence is realizing that it's okay to not understand everything right away. Native speakers often speak at a much faster pace, they connect their words, and they use slang and idiomatic expressions that might be unfamiliar. This can make it difficult for learners, but the more you expose yourself to this type of speech, the more your listening skills will improve. So don't get discouraged if you can't understand everything at first. Instead, focus on the progress you're making, and remember that it's perfectly okay to ask for clarification. Asking someone to repeat what they said is a great way to improve your listening comprehension, and it will help you feel more confident over time.
Yes, Julia, and it's really important to give yourself credit for the progress you're making, even if it feels slow. Every time you listen to fast English, whether it's a podcast, a movie, or a conversation with a native speaker, you're building your skills. Don't be too hard on yourself if you don't understand every single word or sentence. Instead, focus on the bigger picture and celebrate the small victories. Maybe you understood a new phrase, or you caught a word that you didn't understand last time. These are all signs of improvement. The more you expose yourself to fast English, the easier it will become to understand. So, stay patient and remember that every bit of practice counts.
Exactly. And I also think it's important to remember that consistency is key. You won't get better at understanding fast English if you don't practice regularly. Set aside time each day to listen to English, whether it's through podcasts, audiobooks, movies, or even just chatting with friends. The more you listen, the more you'll get used to the speed, the rhythm, and the flow of native speech. It's like learning any new skill. It takes time and consistent practice. And remember, the more you listen, the better you'll get. So be patient with yourself, be confident in your ability to improve, and keep going.
Exactly, Julia. It's all about having the right mindset. Learning to understand fast English isn't an easy task, but if you approach it with the right attitude, confidence in your ability, and patience with the process, you'll be amazed at how much progress you can make. Every day of practice brings you one step closer to your goal. So, embrace the journey, stay consistent, and trust that over time, you will improve. Fast English may seem challenging now, but with persistence and the right attitude, it'll become easier and easier to understand. Keep at it, and you'll see results. All right, now that we've gone over the importance of having both confidence and patience when learning to understand fast English, let's talk about some practical exercises that will help you take your listening skills to the next level. Consistency and practice are key when it comes to language learning. And the good news is that there are several exercises you can start doing right away to improve your understanding of fast speech. We've discussed strategies like shadowing and focusing on key words, but now, let's take a deeper dive into some exercises you can do every day. These exercises will keep you engaged and motivated, while making significant improvements in your listening comprehension. The first one we'll discuss is the daily listening challenge, which is one of the most effective exercises you can do.
Yes, absolutely, Adam. One of the simplest but most effective exercises is to set aside just 5 minutes each day to listen to fast English. It sounds very manageable, right? 5 minutes doesn't seem like a lot of time, but don't underestimate the power of consistency. When you listen to fast English every single day, even if it's just for a short amount of time, you're constantly exposing your brain to the natural speed and rhythm of native speech. Whether it's a podcast, a YouTube video, an audiobook, or even a conversation you have with a native speaker online, the key is to keep the habit regular. Start with 5 minutes a day and gradually, as you feel more comfortable, you can extend that time. Over time, that 5 minutes will turn into a powerful tool to help you become more accustomed to the pace at which native speakers talk.
Exactly, Julia. The reason this daily challenge is so effective is that it gets you used to the natural flow of English. In real-life situations, people don't speak slowly for learners. They speak quickly, and often they don't pause for understanding. The more you practice, the more you'll train your brain to automatically recognize words, pick up on key phrases, and understand context, even when the speech is fast. And this is so important because it reflects real-world conversations. It might seem difficult at first, and you may not understand everything you hear, but remember, the goal is gradual improvement. Daily exposure to fast speech helps break down the mental barriers that can make understanding difficult. And with each session, you'll notice progress.
Exactly, Adam. And once you get comfortable with listening to 5 minutes of fast English, you can move on to another powerful exercise, mimicking native speakers. This technique involves listening to a short audio clip or video of a native speaker and then repeating exactly what they say, word for word. You can start with a few sentences or a short paragraph, and after listening to it once or twice, try to repeat it exactly as it's spoken. Pay close attention to the speaker's intonation, rhythm, and pronunciation. This will help you not only understand how native speakers speak quickly, but also train your ear to pick up the connected speech, reductions, and other features of natural, fast English. Mimicking the way they say things helps you internalize those patterns and sound more natural when you speak yourself.
That's such a great point, Julia. When you mimic native speakers, it helps you practice the natural flow of the language, how words and sounds connect together, how sentences often get shortened, and how pronunciation can change in fast speech. This exercise is incredibly valuable because it forces you to really listen carefully and focus on the way native speakers naturally combine their words. It's almost like you're training your brain and mouth to work together, which can really help when you're trying to understand fast speech in conversations. And the best part is that you can mimic any content that interests you, whether it's a movie, a news report, a podcast episode, or even a conversation. Choose something you enjoy so the process feels natural and engaging.
Exactly. And I'd recommend starting with short clips, maybe 1-minute segments, to avoid feeling overwhelmed. Once you feel more comfortable, you can increase the length of the audio clip. The idea is to listen to the clip, repeat it aloud, and focus on copying the way the speaker says the words. This exercise is not only great for listening comprehension, but it also improves your pronunciation and helps you sound more natural when you speak. As you practice mimicking, you'll start recognizing how connected speech works in real-time conversations, and it'll become easier to understand native speakers when you're out in the world listening to them.
And finally, for our third exercise, one of the most effective ways to improve your listening skills is to join English-speaking groups or communities where you can practice with real people. It's one thing to practice listening to recordings or watching videos, but it's an entirely different experience to practice with actual people in real time. There are so many online platforms, whether it's social media, language exchange apps, or forums, where you can find groups or individuals to practice with. Engage in conversations and listen to others speak English. By practicing with native speakers or other learners, you get the opportunity to hear fast English in a real-world setting.
That's right, Adam. Joining English groups or communities is an excellent way to get more comfortable with real, everyday English. When you practice in these groups, you're not just listening to scripted content, you're listening to people speak in informal, unscripted ways, which is exactly what you'll experience in real-life conversations. And don't be shy to ask questions if you don't understand something. People in these communities are usually more than happy to help. Plus, it gives you the chance to learn from others, share tips, and support each other as you all work toward your language learning goals.
Exactly, Julia. The key to improving your understanding of fast English is to immerse yourself in as many real-life situations as possible. Whether it's through daily listening, mimicking native speakers, or engaging in conversations with others, the more you practice, the better your skills will become. Keep challenging yourself, stay consistent, and remember that every little bit of practice brings you closer to your goal. Over time, you'll find that understanding fast English will become second nature. All right, let's dive into another important aspect of mastering fast English: building a listening routine. Having a consistent routine is one of the most effective ways to see improvement in any skill, and this holds true for language learning as well. Whether you're a beginner or you've been learning English for a while, creating a listening routine can help you stay on track and make steady progress. It's all about forming habits that you can stick to long-term and integrating listening practice into your daily life so that it becomes second nature.
That's right, Adam. A routine gives you structure and consistency, which are key when learning any language. Just like learning to play an instrument or practicing sports, listening to English on a regular basis will help your brain adjust and get better at processing the language more efficiently. You don't need to spend hours every day. Just a little bit of practice each day adds up over time. The goal is to set aside a specific time each day to focus on listening, even if it's only 15 to 30 minutes. Whether it's in the morning, during lunch, or before bed, finding a time that works for you can make all the difference.
Exactly. And it's important to mix things up within your routine to keep things interesting and to expose yourself to different types of fast English. For example, one day you might want to listen to a podcast episode, and the next day you could watch a movie or TV show. You can also listen to a song in English, or maybe even practice by listening to a real conversation in an online language exchange group. Variety helps your brain stay engaged, and it gives you a broader understanding of how fast English is used in different contexts. You'll hear different accents, different speaking speeds, and various types of vocabulary.
That's such a great point, Adam. Variety is key to keeping the routine enjoyable and effective. But let's also talk about something that can really help with your routine, setting specific goals. It's really easy to start listening to English every day and not see a lot of progress because you haven't set any clear targets. By setting achievable goals like, I want to understand 80% of this podcast by the end of the week, or I want to focus on understanding a particular accent this month, you'll feel much more motivated. These small milestones keep you focused and help you measure your improvement, which is incredibly rewarding.
Absolutely, Julia. And you don't have to aim for perfection. Don't expect to understand everything right away. That's not the point. Your goals should be realistic and flexible. Maybe one day you'll understand 70% of the conversation, and the next day you'll catch 80%. Celebrate the small wins. Over time, these small improvements will add up, and you'll find that understanding fast English becomes much easier. The important thing is consistency. The more regularly you practice, the better you'll get.
I completely agree, Adam. And speaking of consistency, another great way to keep up with your routine is to track your progress. Sometimes we don't notice how much we've improved until we look back at where we started. Consider keeping a journal or a log of your listening practice. You can write down what you listened to each day, what you learned, and how much you understood. This simple act of tracking can really help keep you motivated because you'll be able to see your progress over time. It also gives you the opportunity to reflect on areas where you need more practice.
Right. And if you're ever feeling stuck or frustrated, looking back at your progress can be really motivating. It'll remind you of how far you've come and how much you've actually learned. Another idea is to mix in some active listening exercises during your routine. For example, you can listen to a short clip, pause it, and try to write down what you understood. Afterward, you can compare your notes with the transcript or check the meaning of any words you missed. This not only helps your listening comprehension, but also improves your writing and note-taking skills.
Exactly, Adam. Active listening like that is really effective because it makes you more engaged in the learning process. Plus, it's a great way to identify which specific areas you need to focus on. Maybe you're having trouble with a certain accent, or maybe there are specific words or phrases you can't catch. By identifying these challenges, you can adjust your routine to target them. Over time, you'll build your confidence and comprehension, and you'll notice improvements in other areas of your English, like speaking and writing.
So, to recap, creating a listening routine is one of the most important steps you can take to improve your ability to understand fast English. Start small, be consistent, track your progress, and keep your routine engaging by mixing up the types of content you listen to. Set achievable goals, and remember that it's not about perfection, it's about consistent improvement. With dedication and patience, you'll see tremendous progress in your ability to understand fast English. Now let's move on to another incredibly important aspect of understanding fast English: context. While improving your ability to hear and understand individual words is essential, it's just as important to understand the context in which those words are used. Context helps you make sense of the fast speech, and it's the key to understanding meaning, even when the words might be unclear or blurred in a fast-paced conversation. Whether you're listening to a podcast, watching a movie, or having a conversation, understanding the bigger picture, the context of the situation, can make all the difference. So let's talk about why context is so powerful and how you can use it to improve your listening skills.
Exactly, Adam. When you're trying to understand fast English, sometimes you won't catch every word, and that's perfectly okay. Fast speakers often don't pronounce every word clearly, especially when they speak naturally or use reductions and contractions. But if you understand the context of the conversation, you can still follow along and grasp the overall meaning. Let's say you're listening to someone explain a story. Even if you don't understand every single word they say, the general idea of the story will help you make educated guesses about what's being said. This is where context becomes a powerful tool for understanding, especially in fast English.
Right, Julia. Understanding context is especially important when it comes to vocabulary and idiomatic expressions. Native speakers often use slang, phrasal verbs, and idioms, which might be hard to understand if you're just focusing on the individual words. But when you pay attention to the context, you can often infer the meaning of these expressions. For example, if someone says, "I'm feeling under the weather," and you're not familiar with the phrase, you might not know exactly what "under the weather" means. However, if you pay attention to the overall context, like how the person is describing their emotions or physical state, you can guess that they're probably talking about being sick or not feeling well. That's the power of context. It helps you piece together the meaning even when the words themselves are difficult to understand.
That's such a great point, Adam. In addition to helping with vocabulary, context also aids in understanding tone, emotion, and intent. When you're listening to fast English, it's easy to focus solely on the words. But native speakers don't just rely on words. They also use tone of voice, gestures, and other nonverbal cues to communicate meaning. For instance, if someone says, "Wow, that's amazing," with an excited tone, you can tell that they're genuinely impressed, even if the word amazing is said quickly. Context also helps you understand when something is said sarcastically, jokingly, or seriously. By paying attention to how people speak and the situation they're in, you can better understand the message, even if some of the words are a blur in fast speech.
Exactly, Julia. It's about looking at the bigger picture and reading the situation as a whole. Now, how can you practice using context to improve your listening? One of the best ways is by watching TV shows or movies with different types of characters and settings. These scenarios provide rich context that helps you understand what's going on even when the speech is fast. For example, in a comedy, you'll hear fast-paced dialogue filled with jokes, and the way the characters interact will give you important context. Or, if you're watching a drama, the tone of the characters' voices will help you understand the emotions behind their words. When you're exposed to different contexts, you'll become better at deciphering meaning without getting stuck on individual words.
That's a great tip, Adam. I also recommend practicing with real-life conversations, as they often contain unpredictable elements that give you even more context. When you listen to people speak in day-to-day situations, whether it's at a cafe, in a business meeting, or during a casual chat with friends, you'll hear how they use context to express meaning. Often, the situation itself gives you clues. Like if someone is ordering food, you know they're talking about food-related vocabulary, even if the speech is fast. Or if someone is telling a story about an event, the context of the story will help you follow the plot, even if some words are said too quickly to catch.
Great point, Julia. One way to make sure you're actively focusing on context is to practice predicting what someone is going to say next. For instance, while listening to a conversation, try to guess the next word or the next sentence based on what has already been said. This helps you tune into the natural flow of the conversation and keeps you engaged with the context. The more you practice this, the more natural it will feel to use context to fill in the gaps when listening to fast English.
Yes, predicting is a fantastic exercise. Another thing you can try is listening without subtitles at first. This forces you to rely on context to understand the conversation. Of course, you can watch it again with subtitles afterward to check your understanding. But the initial challenge is about focusing on what's being said and piecing it together based on the context around you. This exercise really helps you train your brain to think in context, and over time, you'll get better at understanding fast English without needing to rely on subtitles or translations.
Exactly, Julia. So, to sum up, context is a powerful tool for understanding fast English. Whether it's through vocabulary, tone, or nonverbal cues, context helps you make sense of fast speech, even when the words themselves are difficult to understand. To practice this, expose yourself to different types of content, movies, TV shows, real-life conversations, and challenge yourself to understand the situation as a whole. Pay attention to the bigger picture and use context to help you infer meaning. Over time, this will make it much easier to follow fast English and catch all the important details. One of the biggest challenges English learners face when trying to understand fast speech is frustration. Have you ever been in a situation where you're listening to someone speak, and no matter how hard you try, you just can't seem to catch the words? Maybe you're watching a movie without subtitles, and the dialogue is moving so quickly that it feels impossible to keep up. Or perhaps you're in a real-life conversation, and before you can even process one sentence, the speaker has already moved on to the next one. It can feel overwhelming, and it's easy to get discouraged when it seems like your brain just isn't keeping up with the speed of native speakers. But here's the truth. This frustration is completely normal, and it's actually part of the learning process. If you've ever felt this way, you are not alone. Today, we're going to talk about why this frustration happens, and more importantly, how to overcome it so that you can keep improving your listening skills without feeling discouraged.
That's such an important topic, Adam, because frustration is one of the biggest reasons why many learners give up on improving their listening skills. It's not that they don't want to improve, it's just that when they don't see progress immediately, they start to feel like maybe they're not good enough or that they'll never understand fast English. But the reality is, everyone struggles at first. Even advanced learners who have been studying for years still have moments where they don't understand everything. And guess what? Even native speakers sometimes struggle to catch every single word in a fast conversation, especially if the speaker has a strong accent or is using unfamiliar slang. The key is to recognize that frustration is not a sign of failure. It's actually a sign that you're challenging yourself and pushing your brain to adapt to something new.
That's exactly right, Julia. If you're never struggling, it probably means you're not pushing yourself hard enough. Learning to understand fast English is just like training a muscle. At first, it feels difficult and even exhausting, but the more you practice, the stronger you get. But let's talk about the real reasons behind this frustration. Why does fast English seem so difficult to process? One major reason is that your brain is still translating English into your native language. If you're constantly trying to convert what you hear into your first language before understanding it, that extra step slows you down and makes fast speech feel impossible to follow. This is why we always encourage learners to start thinking in English instead of translating. The more you expose yourself to English without translating every word, the faster your brain will become at processing meaning directly in English.
Another big reason for frustration is the fear of making mistakes or feeling embarrassed when you don't understand something. Many learners hesitate to ask someone to repeat themselves because they're afraid of looking foolish or slowing down the conversation. But here's the thing, native speakers don't expect you to be perfect. Think about when someone speaks your native language as a second language. If they don't understand something and ask you to repeat, do you get annoyed? Of course not. You probably appreciate their effort and are happy to clarify. It's the same when you're learning English. Don't be afraid to ask someone to slow down, repeat themselves, or explain a word. In fact, doing this will help you improve faster because it forces you to engage with the language in real time.
That's such an important mindset shift, Julia. Instead of seeing frustration as a bad thing, try to see it as a sign that you're growing. The people who become fluent in English aren't the ones who never struggle. They're the ones who push through the frustration and keep going even when it feels difficult. So how can we actually deal with this frustration in a practical way? One great method is to focus on progress, not perfection. Instead of feeling discouraged when you don't understand everything, take a step back and recognize the small improvements you're making. Maybe last month you couldn't understand a single sentence in a fast conversation, but today you caught a few words or phrases. That's progress. Maybe last week you had to replay a video 10 times to understand a sentence, but today you only needed to replay it 5 times. That's progress too. When you start celebrating these small wins, it keeps you motivated and helps you stay consistent.
Absolutely, Adam. And another great way to deal with frustration is to give yourself permission to not understand everything. Many learners put pressure on themselves to catch every single word, but the reality is, even native speakers don't understand everything all the time. Have you ever been in a situation where someone was speaking in your native language, but you got distracted for a second and missed part of what they said? It happens all the time. The difference is that native speakers don't panic when this happens. They just use context to fill in the gaps. So instead of getting frustrated when you miss a word, focus on the overall meaning of the conversation. If you don't understand something right away, don't stress, just keep listening. And often, the next few sentences will help you figure out what's going on.
That's such a great point, Julia. And speaking of context, one of the best ways to deal with frustration is to use subtitles strategically. Many learners rely too much on subtitles, and while they can be helpful, they can also become a crutch. If you always watch English movies and shows with subtitles in your native language, your brain won't get the practice it needs to process English on its own. Instead, try watching with English subtitles first, and then gradually transition to watching without them. It will feel uncomfortable at first, but that discomfort is actually a sign that you're improving.
And let's not forget the importance of taking breaks and being kind to yourself. If you're feeling really frustrated, sometimes the best thing you can do is step away for a bit. Take a short break, go for a walk, listen to some music, and then come back with a fresh mindset. Learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint. There will be ups and downs, and that's completely normal. Just remember that every time you push through the frustration, you're getting one step closer to understanding fast English more naturally.
So, to wrap up this section, let's go over the key takeaways. First, frustration is completely normal, and it's actually a sign that you're pushing yourself to grow. Second, try to think in English instead of translating, as this will speed up your comprehension. Third, don't be afraid to ask for repetition or clarification. It's a natural part of learning. Fourth, focus on progress, not perfection, and celebrate the small wins along the way. And finally, be patient with yourself. Take breaks when needed, and keep going even when it feels difficult. The learners who improve the most are the ones who don't give up.
That's right, Adam. And we just want to remind you that you're doing amazing just by listening to this podcast and making the effort to improve. Keep practicing, stay positive, and trust that with time, you will understand fast English more easily.
Well, it looks like we've covered a lot of ground today on how to understand fast English, and I hope you're feeling more confident about tackling the challenge. Just to quickly recap what we've discussed, we started by talking about the main reasons why fast English can be so difficult to understand, especially for beginners. We covered how native speakers often speak quickly, use contractions, reduce words, and blend sounds together. We also discussed how idioms, slang, and connected speech can make fast English even harder to follow. But we didn't stop there. Our goal today was not just to point out the challenges, but to provide you with the tools to overcome them. We explored several effective strategies that you can start using right away to improve your listening skills, such as focusing on key words, practicing with slower speech before moving to natural speed, and using techniques like shadowing and repeated listening.
Exactly, Adam. We also touched on how important it is to build a listening routine, a regular practice that works for you. It's crucial to be patient and consistent, and remember, progress takes time. You don't need to understand everything all at once. We also talked about the importance of context in understanding fast English, and how knowing the context of a conversation, including the situation, the tone, and the words around the conversation, can help you figure out what's being said, even when the speaker is talking quickly. One of the biggest takeaways from today is that it's okay not to understand everything. You just have to stay engaged and practice regularly. Over time, you will begin to notice improvements in your listening comprehension.
That's right, Julia. And speaking of practice, we can't emphasize enough how important it is to practice daily. As we've mentioned throughout this episode, building a strong listening habit will not only improve your ability to understand fast English, but also help you feel more comfortable and confident when you're exposed to natural speech. So, make sure that listening to English is a part of your everyday routine, whether it's through podcasts, movies, TV shows, songs, or conversations. The more you practice, the more your brain will get used to processing fast speech, and gradually it will become easier and more natural for you.
And remember, don't be afraid to ask for help or clarification when you don't understand something. Native speakers often don't mind repeating themselves, and asking for clarification is a great way to get better. Keep pushing yourself, but also celebrate the small victories along the way. Recognize how much you've improved, even in small moments, and if you ever feel stuck or frustrated, know that everyone goes through it, and that's just part of the learning process. So, keep going and stay consistent, because with time, you will see results.
Before we wrap up, I'd like to invite you to share your experiences with us. Have you tried some of the strategies we discussed today? How have they helped you in understanding fast English? We would love to hear your thoughts, tips, and progress. Feel free to leave a comment down below or connect with us on social media. Let's keep this conversation going. Your feedback is really important to us, and it helps us tailor our content to what you need most.
Absolutely, Adam. We love hearing from you, and your feedback helps us make this podcast even better. Plus, it's always great to know what's working for you, so we can continue providing the best tips and strategies to help you improve your English listening skills. So don't hesitate to share your journey with us.
And lastly, I just want to say thank you to all of you for tuning in today. Your dedication to learning English is truly inspiring, and we're so glad you chose to spend this time with us. We hope you're feeling a little more confident about understanding fast English now, and that you'll be able to apply these tips in your own practice. As always, stay patient, stay consistent, and remember that improvement is a journey. You're doing great, and we're here to support you every step of the way. Thank you again for listening, and we look forward to bringing you more helpful content in future episodes.
Thank you so much, everyone. We'll be back soon with more tips and lessons to help you on your English learning journey. Until then, keep practicing and take care.
Goodbye, everyone, and take care.